Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And I'm Robert Winters.
Yes, sir.
And it is still July 20th.
It's July 20th. That's right. It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as we were mentioning,
yes.
Summertime in an odd numbered year is electioneering, but it's also committee meetings in the absence of regular city council meetings.
Right, which then have even a heightened interest because of it's a chance to kind of put out your
it's some of what is said or done at some of these committee meetings miraculously find their way into campaign literature to show what how hard candidate so and so is working on such and such a matter.
Okay.
And the big things that are kind of in the air, kind of floating right now, are that really I haven't heard a whole lot of activity on in terms of the politicking is charter changes, some of those
charter reform, right?
The city manager search.
Right.
Honestly, I think getting too deeply into that issue doesn't help you politically right now, but we'll see.
I mean, there've been 2 meetings, so they're continued. It's more about the process and who they're going to hire as the search firm and all that stuff.
So anyway, so that's happening.
But the interesting, go ahead.
No, one of the committee meetings, I did not tune into it, but I believe you did, which of some interest was the
car one.
Yeah, the one had to do with what they called car storage.
Well, it's the transportation and something committee, right?
Right. Yeah.
And Jivan is the chair of that. Yes.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
so
it's like you can often tell people's political inclinations by whether they use the word parking or car storage.
Oh yeah. Oh,
right.
Forget parking. Right.
It's like you need I should write sort of like a reader's guide or a viewer's guide to listening to city council rhetoric.
Yeah. I know.
So you can kind of know where they're really coming from.
Well, actually, they did have, and I didn't write it down. I didn't remember it. About the origin of the word even park. I think either Quentin brought it up or something, so that we're not using it correctly anyway. But anyway. Go watch the committee meeting if you want to see that. Yeah.
I think it's more like a classic example of subvert the dominant paradigm. So what you do is you just sort of attack the language, and then by doing so you try to undermine the concept of something as normal, right? So we used to think people drive cars, they own cars, they get resident permits and do all of that. There's a lot of people, especially people without cars, who don't want the world to be viewed that way, and I understand that. But
and they want everyone should be on a bike or this or that. I think you should have choices, and I think, hey, if I've said this before, if you want to eliminate driving around Harvard Square and close up, I fine, do it.
There's good ways and bad ways of doing it, but
exactly.
I think if one of the things COVID has shown us is that there are certain kinds of reconfigurations of roadways
that do not work at all.
Some work well, some don't work at all.
Not the Magazine Street one last
summer. Well, some were all for show and made
barriers, watching the bicyclists mow you down. Who's going to walk in? I'm sorry, that was a nightmare. I'm so glad that we're not doing that again.
Yeah. So I'm all for creative adaptation of roadways and doing interesting things and all of that stuff. But I also think buses need to get through, emergency vehicles need to get through. People do need to get going where they're going to work and not.
And also, we want things, and there need to be deliveries. And yes, they may have to park in the bike lane because there's nowhere else to park. I mean,
you can basically engineer out all possible reasonable ways for a car to pause, to stop, to drop something off, and pick something up. And then for somebody to come out and yell and scream on See Click Fix how outraged they are because such and such a truck had no other option.
I know. That See Click Fix thing. I'm sorry.
My favorite, and listen, if somebody's just being outrageous and doing something unnecessarily, like for example, there's a perfectly good parking space, but you insist on doing something stupid anyway, I'm all for yelling and screaming about that. But
But if it's
I've
just
actually
for
seen
a couple
people
minutes, I
they
know,
lose their mind because an
I
armored
know.
vehicle
Yeah,
pulled up in front of a bank, had no place to go to be close to the bank, but to
armored
be in
vehicle.
a bike lane. And it was
Yeah,
like, this is
yeah,
outrage.
yeah.
Why doesn't the armored
You
vehicle
saw
park around
that?
the corner and then
Somebody,
walk down the street with sacks full of money?
oh my,
I have seen it. I have seen it on See Click Fix. Yes. So it's just crazy talk, we need to kind of maybe get to some kind of better understanding about the gray areas of the law, or maybe make them not gray, make them
all right, so let
legal.
me give you some highlights from this meeting because that I took away, because there was a lot of public comment, although it was all about, although I think Heather Hoffman might have had more reasonable, aspiration versus reality were her comments, which so she was more on the mark. But well, the guitar shop owner, which I heard her speak at the other meeting, I guess there's some plans to take away spaces along that stretch of Mass Ave. That's
Is that
past
toward
Porter
Porter's?
Square, right?
Yeah, around Porter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to be tricky.
Yep, exactly. And then Bill McVinney and his partner or wife, I don't know, she does
Carolyn
not own a
Cole.
car, right? Against subsidized parking spaces. That's what he calls those.
Right.
Suzanne Blier suggested rickshaws. I thought that was interesting. I swear to
I
God.
love it.
She said, I have a parking space and I don't drive. I walk everywhere. Well, good. Okay. So,
Well, you got to love the virtue.
but then there was another woman, Annette Osgood. I don't know who she is, but she said lack of parking is detrimental to small businesses, which can be.
And it depends upon the business,
Exactly.
Cyclists love to say, oh, no. If you eliminate parking, that's good for business. It's just like Animal Farm. I'm sorry.
I know.
This is just crazy talk. If you're running a cafe, maybe you're right.
Right.
If you're running a refrigerator dealership, not so correct.
Right.
Supermarkets, people need to pull up and pick up their
know.
groceries,
So Joe Barr in the traffic department did do a presentation, which, and then I guess, I don't know, 37,000 residential permits have been issued in the city. Does that make sense? I guess it could be, yeah.
I mean, what's interesting to me sometimes is seeing whether they're going up or going down.
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of parts of this
It's going
country.
down, actually. I think they mentioned that people are,
metropolitan areas, a lot of younger people especially are choosing to go carless.
Right.
It's too much of a headache and they don't need it.
Right, because their jobs might be either remote or they can just get on the subway or walk to their work. But if you have a job where you really do need to go, like my daughter, she's a photographer, she needs to quit, So whatever. But I think some of the one of the I guess it was Shivan, I don't know, said if people have a parking space, they shouldn't get a residential permit because it lets you park all over the city, which my daughter.
Honestly, that is like an adolescent viewpoint.
I know, really.
That basically says, okay, the only reason why, the only place you'd ever put a car is storing it at your house.
Yeah.
People need to also.
And some people may need to go 2 miles. They need their car to go shopping.
Or their sister lives on the other side of town and they like to go visiting. And then what, are you going to get a ticket now? Or are you going to need to ask for a visitor's permit in your own town just because you're visiting?
Speaking of visitors permits, someone did bring up the fact that if someone didn't own a car, why should they pay the same as?
That's a perfectly valid.
And also I do think permits I do think they're kind of inexpensive.
I don't think that
they could be raised.
It could be raised, but trying to turn it into a moneymaker, to me, I don't know.
No, it's not a question of money making. Well, if they think it's going to deter people from using a car, unless it's $1,000, no, I don't think.
But I think people need to acknowledge the fact that the city, in many respects, was developed largely a lot of places without driveways. My house has no driveway.
Right.
I have no choice.
People are buying $1 million condos without driveways. That's what blows my mind. I mean, to me, I
like to kind of razz the progressives on this one and say that, I like to park on the street with my fellow residents because it's a form of sharing.
Oh, geez, Robert. Okay. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
tell me that in the winter.
The space. Why would I need to own the space?
I know.
Isn't it better to share spaces?
frankly, okay, all right, all right. Well, you know, Alana brought up the point, although I don't know who owns 6 cars. She brought up some example that, you know, you pay the same for whether it's a second or a third or a fourth
All
car.
right, so that has been proposed at various times
And
over
to
the
me,
years.
yeah, who's owning more than,
The city
you know,
actually came
yeah.
back with a proposal a
yeah,
long time ago to
okay,
charge a certain amount for the first one,
all right.
next for the second, and
And
then
what
it
happened to that?
accelerated up there. City council voted it down, I believe 8-0. Now, if that vote were to take place today, it
Oh,
wouldn't
it would,
be 8-0. It would
well,
be
someone should bring it up.
closer.
That's a
Somebody could
policy
bring it
order
up.
that I would support.
Yeah, somebody
Yeah.
could bring it up,
Yeah.
But the thing is, it has also been proposed over the years to do what they do in Boston, which is to have different zones. So I would have a mid-Cambridge. My sticker
Right.
would only be valid in mid-Cambridge,
Guess what? They don't pay for their permits. You
and
just
they don't pay
apply
for their
for it.
permits.
So
Yeah.
that's different.
So it's a
Boston is so
trade-off,
big,
yeah.
they're not going to give a citywide permit. I understand that.
Exactly.
All right, so okay, so
Yeah.
that was that.
Anyway, so I
Yeah.
think there are valid conversations to be had, but
I know.
honestly, these city councilors are not the best people to be making these
No.
conversations, because
No.
I think some of them have their minds completely in the
Yeah.
wrong places. But there was one other one I believe you attended having to do with, it was kind of came out of nowhere for me. It was was it health and environment? It had to do with water, Cambridge water.
Oh yeah, and did you watch that one?
I did not. I meant to do it, but I haven't seen it.
It's really good. I mean, the health and environment, it was basically on looking at our water supply.
Right.
And it was a really good presentation by Sam Lipson.
Sam Lipson was public health. Sam Corda.
Oh, Sam Corda, sorry.
So he's the managing director of the Cambridge
He gave
Water
a presentation with all the, showing graphs and things. And then, but it started out with Quentin showing his rusted out solar water electric heaters that he's had to replace because the corrosiveness in Cambridge water. So that's really been the gist of this meeting, was that our water is too corrosive to solar, electric, whatever, plus coffee roasters. So we'll get into that. But anyway, that was, no, seriously, there was over a half an hour of a presentation by.
I'm not going to claim to have all the answers on this one, but what I will say is this. One of the things I learned when I was on a water and sewer advisory committee a long time ago now, was that the Cambridge.
By the way, this is my Cambridge water. I find it tastes fine.
There we go. The Cambridge, the water distribution system, all the water mains were pretty aged at some point. Some of them are really old now, but they're really working well. Yeah. They've been a lot of the big major ones have been relined, and and work really quite well now. But some of them were so occluded that if you had a diameter like this, I saw the pipes where you couldn't even see through it.
Wow.
But somehow water was going through there to service a whole street.
Yeah.
So the pressure was terrible if there had been a fire, and if you were counting on fire hydrants, that would not have been a very good outcome. So the city of Cambridge was far ahead of most other cities and towns in rehabbing their distribution system. They would commit to doing X number of miles per year and getting them up to stuff, and they did a lot of work on it. So that was great. But one of the realities is that one of the things they learned was that if there was an older pipe that maybe some that had home mains that had the pipe that goes into your house, individual homes, somehow homes still had lead mains. I still had a lead pipe coming to my house up to a certain point.
But that doesn't cause the corrosiveness.
No, it doesn't cause the corrosiveness. But the thing is that what they did is they would adjust the pH levels to the water into the alkaline range to make sure that, because it was even a little bit acidic, it actually would eat into some of that. So by adjusting the pH accordingly, it was able to prevent that type of deterioration of the interiors of the pipes. So I always laugh a little bit when people talk about the corrosiveness, because
isn't it the chloride in the system?
I don't know exactly if it's a chlorine, because that's actually mandated by federal law. It's a chlorine residual.
But apparently, according to what they're saying, is that the water supply from the Quabbin or whatever doesn't have this quality.
We have an elevated, not by a whole lot, but by enough to trigger a warning about sodium levels. But it's really
it is. It's sodium chloride.
It's for the concern for people who have potential high blood pressure issues.
But what about coffee roasters? That's the complaint seems to be from people making coffee, businesses making coffee. 'Cause I've heard, no, it's not fun. I've heard this before. And then in fact, one of them said that equipment manufacturers of this equipment, when they find out that it's a Cambridge establishment, they won't guarantee the equipment.
I don't think it's chlorine, but there is a kind of a mineral deposit that can build up.
Right.
It's kind of whitish. You'll notice it even when I replace a boiler or hot water heater, you can see that. So over time, that can be a potential problem, But in terms of the health quality and drinking of the water, it's actually superb water.
That's apparently, but then the other thing was the PFAS, but that's an ongoing thing, which,
They're monitoring that. I think they've got that under control.
Yeah, and then they also had a presentation by this guy from BU about PFAS in particular. And it's interesting what he didn't mention, because he mentioned the water treatment plants, and he didn't mention traditional compost facilities that have an issue with these, because of a lot of at least previous compostable ware and stuff does have PFAS. A lot of things have PFAS in them, clothing, creams, a lot of stuff. It's not just coming through water, it's just, I mean, so I felt the water department and Owen piped in, that's cute, stuff. And, that we do have pretty good water. But then one of the public commenters, there's only like a couple, who said that he had to go out to Costco to get water.
That's silly.
Because the water tasted like baking soda. I mean, and Sam Porter was saying, gee, I drink the water. I just drank the water. And I'm thinking, really?
Now,
go back to Brookline then, because he's saying he moved from Brookline.
Well, here's what I'll say to that. I grew up in New York City, and New York City has some of the best drinking water in the universe.
True.
It's Croton water from upstate New York, fabulous water. If there's anything negative about New York City water, it's only because of the local plumbing within individual buildings or streets. But the water comes in, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
Right. So coming up to Boston, initially years ago, I thought Cambridge had a little too much chlorine in it. But that was with the old treatment plant, which was dated to about 1923, the McGinnis plant.
Yeah, but now we have this all new treatment plant.
Yeah, and we also had the Payson Park Reservoir up at the top of the hill in Belmont, which was an open basin. So they kind of overdosed it a little bit so that it would still retain, because some of that effervesces out.
All right, so what is the big issue? Because I guess the Quabbin obviously is out in Western Mass, so it's more pristine, I guess, than where our water is coming from, right?
Right. But they still have to introduce chlorine into the Quabbin water, and they do, just as we introduce chlorine into ours, because it's a requirement for municipal water supplies.
So it's, but that's not the corrosiveness. It's not the chlorine, right?
Yeah, there are some other minerals within ours, but does that add to the taste? It might a little bit, But as I say, I once visited a brother of mine in Las Vegas. And they're drinking Lake Mead water. And in fact, if you go drinking water.
Guess what? Lake Mead's running out of water. That's the other thing. Water in the West is like, they are so concerned. They don't have enough water. And we are complaining about the taste.
But if you drink, I actually found the water in some places, like in Las Vegas, unpalatable. I had to put lemon in it because I couldn't stand it.
Interesting. That's interesting.
All right. So I'm aware of the notion that if you're coming from one place, the water may taste a little odd at first.
Right.
But after a while, it's just not really realistic.
So I mean,
so we have we have I forget what our usage is on a per day basis. Once upon a time, it was over 15 million gallons a day, and then it was dropped down to considerably less. Yeah. But there's so much water saving equipment now. But once upon a time, the maximum safe field capacity for the Quabbin system was, I think, about 300 million gallons per day. If Cambridge's water was ever taken offline, that would have been terrible, because then we would have been completely dependent on the Quabbin system at a time when
that's what
they
Quentin
were above
wants
capacity.
us to do. He wants us to get. I mean, he wants us to get our money, put our money. He says, "Are we just doing this because it's cheaper?" But then they pointed out to him that it would be twice as much if we went onto the MWR.
It's not a marginal increase.
Plus, they are our backup, and we have redundancy, as Owen said. And
I'm going to say one other thing about redundancy. It's the one thing, the number one thing I
love that
learned,
word. I love when Owen.
When I was on the Water and Sewer Advisory Committee, one thing I really learned was that the reason why the municipal water supply, really water supplies in general. And when Boston got Cochiti water coming in, and
Right,
then eventually, Quabbin water, many
right.
years later, it was really because there had been major fires in these places, and water supplies were as much about fire protection as they
Absolutely.
are about
Right,
drinking water. In fact,
right.
more so.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
right now, Cambridge is lucky in that we have our
yeah,
own water supply. We have a
right.
double basin up in Basin Park to
I'm
provide
all
pressure
for it.
head
And you're
to
going to show,
basically
right.
to
Yes.
some of that. I mean, and if our system were to suffer a breakdown for some reason, like when we went offline for the
Right.
rebuilding of the treatment plant, we have a backup of MWRA. So we
Plus
have the
we had that,
redundancy built in.
and we had that drought for a while, a couple
Yeah.
summers
If
ago, and
anybody
we
would
were
like
able
to
to
know
go.
where the interconnections are with MWRA, I'd be more than happy to show you them. There are 3, and I know exactly where they all are.
Okay, but you have photos of where some
Yeah,
of
so I
our
thought
water.
just to sort of speak a little bit about it, because the thing is when people, they can
Yeah.
talk out of their back of their heads
I
sometimes,
just,
and
I
they
was
don't
so
really
upset by this. I
understand
mean, to have,
where they
I
are.
don't know,
Okay,
I just, oh,
so
yeah.
anyway, I'm just going to
Okay.
show a few images
All right.
here, not
And
to
what is
obsess
this?
on it here.
This
This is kind of a fraudulent picture in a sense that it makes it look
Oh,
like a big cascading waterfall, but it's actually just more of a brook. It's
okay,
just that it's taken up close. But this is actually, there's a pond. It's just north of Cat Rocks Park, which is out around Weston area. And
okay.
the Hobbs Brook flows through there.
That's one of our major.
And this is actually the
right?
Hobbs Brook. And this is Cambridge's water. 2/3 approximately, I think typically about 2/3 of the water is from Hobbs Brook and 1/3 from Stony Brook. I
And
could
we're
have that
buying land
wrong.
around these places. That's
They
the
do
other
water
big-
protection
water
up there.
protection.
But it's actually
Right.
one of my favorite places, and I'm more than
Yeah.
happy to take anybody who wants to go there out
Yeah.
to Cat Rocks Park to go for
Yeah.
walking around in the park, which actually has the Hobbs Brook running right down through the middle of it.
And you're going to
you
show
know?
us some of this, right?
And just so
Okay.
people have a little sense about
Oh, yeah.
where
Now
we
this
are
is-
here.
So I think this is in the literature that they sent out.
Yeah. So Fresh Pond, a lot of people think
Yeah.
it all just comes from Fresh Pond, but Fresh Pond is
No.
really more of an almost a penultimate final distribution
Right.
reservoir.
Yeah. So it's sort
The
of,
actual distribution reservoir is this little basin called Payson Park Reservoir up on a hill in
Okay.
Belmont. It's
right.
essentially our water tower.
Right.
But the water flows from the Hobbs Basin
Mhm.
and the Stony Brook Basin. The Stony Brook Basin was first found in the late 1800s. The Hobbs was put in soon afterwards, right? But they joined together, the Hobbs and
Yeah.
the Stony Brook together, and then they flow into the Stony Brook Basin, which is out near Brandeis University.
But
And
is it
from there,
subject to more runoff from roads? Because you see that
it
you've got-
potentially, yes. So that's why
That's
having
why.
some level of
Right.
watershed protection
Right.
up in the watershed is so crucially important. And the city, even sometimes with Community Preservation Act funds,
Mhm.
actually purchases some land for watershed
Yeah, that
protection.
came up in a few
Yeah.
meetings ago, because then they talked about that, and it
Yeah.
actually makes it, yeah.
Yeah, there are some points of potential
Mhm.
vulnerability. And
Sure.
and we've been really on the case for a long, long time to
Yeah.
make sure we try and keep
I
things
know.
as safe and secure as possible. And by the way, that's not only beneficial for Cambridge, it's also beneficial for Weston, Lexington,
Exactly.
Waltham, and
Yeah.
Lincoln. The fact that we actually have these as basically conservation lands is something they like. So
I'm, in DPW, I trust in the water
Yeah.
body. And especially, given the time when we just look out west and see what they're dealing with fires and drought
we should
and
we
real
should be
water
thrilled.
shortages. We should be thankful
we should
for
be
what we have.
proud
I know.
of the
I know.
people who came before us
Stop
more than 100
complaining.
years
I mean,
ago and
seriously?
established this system.
Drink the water. Is it
Yeah,
going to
but
kill you?
so people just think, oh, fresh pond, but it's really it's a much
beyond
more
there.
elaborate system. Yes, it's a surface water supply. It's not groundwater. It's not
Right.
pumped from wells. It's not like
Yeah.
Poland Springs,
Yeah.
But the thing is, we have a top-notch, state-of-the-art
Mm-hmm.
filtration plant and treatment facility at Fresh Pond
So
now,
I just
which does a
yeah.
great job.
Just recycle
Um,
all those water bottles that they're buying.
Yeah. By the
from
way, I'm just
Costco.
gonna
Yeah.
scan just quickly down here, just some of the
You
pictures.
have some other photos. Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I wanted to
so
see. Yeah.
I've been getting around now that I've got a motor vehicle that I can count on lately.
Right. Look at
And
that.
I was
That
out
looks
at the
like right
Hobbs
out
Brook
of- Yeah,
Basin.
look at that.
This is the gatehouse for the Hobbs Brook Basin
Right.
at the Cambridge Reservoir.
I've been on that walk because I've seen that.
That's the one you see, on the west side of Route 128 out there. It's
Okay.
near the
All right.
Costco.
Right. Okay.
There's, some swans in there, some other
Wow.
birds, and you see a lot of life. It is filled to the brim right now, by the way,
Interesting. Yeah, of
because of all the
course.
rains.
Yeah.
It can recharge pretty quickly.
Well, that's
I'll
now
kind
you're
of skip
going.
ahead. It's actually
Okay.
out in an area, close to what we call the Lakes District,
What are we
which
looking at?
is,
Wait, this says
uh,
Riverside.
yeah, well, the thing is, I'm just pointing out that these Riverside Park
Oh,
is on the Charles River. The Cambridge water supply, actually, just to kind of show you here,
oh, right.
if it were to ever, this is the Stony
Oh,
Brook
that's the
Basin, which
Stony
is
Brook Basin.
this
Okay.
the one that's further to the south, and this is the red gatehouse of the Stony Brook Basin.
Yeah.
But what this is a photo looking up the spillway for if it overtops the dam. Right now, you can
Okay.
put in flashboards to raise and lower this.
I
Right
see.
now, it's really close to topping. If I
Is
went out
it?
there, maybe with the recent rains, it
Oh,
would even be flowing down. But
wow.
if it does flow down, it cascades right into the Charles River,
I see.
right? And
Hmm.
that's in the Lakes District, which is where some of those other photos were taking up around, where the Pony Trust Bridge
Right.
was dedicated recently,
Oh, right,
where
right. Yeah, you
where
said that.
people go boating to this day out in the Charles.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a sort of a great area, but
Okay.
I just really think that people in Cambridge
Mhm.
should, first off, they should really learn more about their water system and
They should learn more about the infrastructure in the city and just learn
they should
about what's
really
under
do
the
that.
streets and what's under,
And,
uh,
and I got to say, Cat Rocks Park, up off Dravington Way out there is a great, great place to go for a little walk, and if somebody wants to go, I'll go, because I
let
enjoy being
Robert
out
know
there a
and he'll
lot.
organize it.
I'll
Okay.
go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I will
Right.
lead you through a walk through Cat Rocks Park in the Cambridge watershed.
Okay.
So if yes, I encourage everybody to walk around Fresh Pond, but that's not the whole story.
Well,
Learn
no.
how the
Yeah.
system works.
Yep.
You can see the pipes. They actually ship it up to the hill, up to the Paysun Park, and it comes
Read those
back
things that
down.
come to you every once in a
Yeah,
while.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
important
this
to
is
read
something
that. Yeah.
we should
I
be
know.
celebrating. We
I
really
know.
can. Are there little things that could be improved here and there?
Sure.
Sure.
Right.
And we've got a full service lab and we're working hard on it, So
I know.
anyway, I think it's a good
Right.
system and learn more about it.
Good
So,
enough for me. I'm not picky.
yeah.
Okay.
So
So
I guess
we're winding down, and our next meeting is actually right after the summer meeting, I believe.
I think that's exactly right.
And it's
So
the
we
first
won't be
Tuesday,
back
so
till
that'll be
early August.
interesting.
So anyway,
Okay, we'll
see
see
you
you
then.
then. Bye-bye.